The sound was the first thing that assaulted her. It wasn't just noise, it was a physical weight. The clinking of $200 crystal flutes, the shrill, calculated laughter of women wearing the price of a house in diamonds, and the deep, rumbling baritone of men who owned the city, or at least pretended to. This was the annual Bianchi Benefactors Gala, a glittering lie held at the Falcon's Crest, the family's sprawling granite fortress on the Long Island Gold Coast. And Serafina de Rosa was just part of the furniture. She smoothed the front of her starched black apron, her fingers catching on the cheap, stiff fabric. At 22, she was a scholarship student at NYU, specializing in architectural history. By night, she worked for a high-end catering company that serviced the monsters of Manhattan. The irony was not lost on her. She studied the beautiful buildings they erected, while serving them canapés inside. De Rosa, table 4, shark fins in tuxedos. Need more dom, hissed Mr. Henderson, the catering manager, his face a pinched mask of stress. Yes, Mr. Henderson. Serafina moved with practiced invisibility, her tray held high. She was good at this, good at being a ghost. She had a plain, forgettable face, brown hair pulled into a severe bun, and the tired, perpetually worried eyes of someone who checks their bank account before buying groceries. She navigated the floor, a sea of Armani, Valentino, and Brioni. These people didn't see her. They saw the tray. They would take a glass without looking up, continuing their conversations about leveraged buyouts and that problem in the shipping yards. And then there was the eye of the storm, Don Valerio Bianchi. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but the gravity of the entire gala bent around him. He stood near the grand fireplace, a monolith of bespoke tailoring and quiet, lethal charisma. He was laughing, a glass of dark amber liquid in his hand, but his eyes, a sharp, piercing grey, never stopped moving. They swept the room with the predatory focus of the falcon his estate was named for. Beside him stood his nephew, Marco Rinaldi, a man who wore his handsome features like a weapon, all polished teeth and a cruel, assessing gaze. Serafina drifted, refilling glasses, offering blinnies. Her route took her past the grand, sweeping staircase and toward a recessed alcove almost hidden by a spray of white orchids that must have cost more than her semester's tuition. That's where she saw him. He was a rumor she'd heard whispered in the kitchens. The Don's boy. The simple one. L'ombra. The shadow. He couldn't have been much older than her, maybe 24 or 25. He was tall, with the same dark, unruly hair as the Don. But where Valerio was all sharp angles and forward momentum, this young man was a study in contained stillness. He wore a tuxedo that fit his lean frame perfectly, but the formality ended there. He was tucked into the alcove, back to the wall, as if trying to merge with the damask wallpaper. On his head were a pair of large, professional-grade Sennheiser headphones, the kind used in a recording studio, completely isolating him from the cacophony. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were cast down, focused entirely on the object in his hands. It was a complex, beautiful thing, a silver puzzle box, something intricate and mechanical. His long, pale fingers moved over it with astonishing speed and precision, clicking, turning, and manipulating the components in a pattern that seemed both random and deeply methodical. He was stimming, Serafina realized, his focus so absolute that the entire 1,000-person gala ceased to exist. He was beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at, fine-boned, with a classical structure that felt out of place in this world of brute force. He was the only real thing in the room. A burst of laughter, loud and obnoxious, came from a nearby group. A capo with a neck like a tree trunk gestured dismissively toward the alcove. Valerio keeps him like a pet, the man sneered to his companion. A broken toy. Shameful. The companion, a younger man with slicked back hair, just grunted. Better seen and not heard, or in his case, not seen or heard. They laughed and moved on. Serafina felt a sharp, hot spike of anger in her chest. She watched the young man, Matteo Bianchi. His fingers paused on the puzzle box. He hadn't lifted his head, but his shoulders had tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd heard them. Or perhaps he'd felt the shift in energy, the specific, targeted malice. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own home, surrounded by people who saw him as a defect, a liability, in a world that valued only strength and cunning. Serafina knew what that felt like, to be invisible, to be a ghost. But this was worse. He wasn't invisible. He was a spectacle of perceived failure. She held her tray, the weight of the champagne glasses suddenly unbearable. She was supposed to move on, to refill the shark fins at table 4, but her feet felt rooted to the expensive Persian rug. She watched him for another minute, her heart aching with a strange, fierce recognition. He was an island of silence in an ocean of noise, and he was completely, utterly alone. The orchestra, a 20-piece ensemble flown in from Milan, had been playing light, forgettable classical music. Now a hush fell as Don Valerio Bianchi himself strode to the small stage. The room quieted instantly, the silence so sudden it was almost violent. "My friends!" Valerio's voice boomed, amplified by a microphone but needing no help. "My family." His gaze swept the room, and Serafina saw people stiffen, straighten their spines, and force smiles. "We are here tonight to celebrate prosperity, to celebrate famiglia, to acknowledge the bonds that keep us strong." Serafina, standing near the alcove, watched Matteo. He hadn't looked up, but his fingers had stilled on his silver puzzle. He was listening in his own way. "And in celebration," Valerio continued, "I would like to welcome my nephew, Marco, to his new role overseeing our ventures in the Fulton district." A round of applause, this one genuine. Marco Rinaldi stepped forward, bowing to his uncle, his smile a flash of predatory white. He was the heir apparent. He was strong, charismatic, and ruthless. He was everything, Serafina thought with a glance at the alcove, that Matteo was not. "And now," Valerio declared, "let us enjoy the night. The first dance, as always, is for the family." The orchestra leader raised his baton, and the sweeping, romantic strains of a Strauss waltz, the Blue Danube, filled the air. Valerio took the hand of a woman Serafina didn't recognize, some cousin or allied matriarch, and led her to the floor. Other couples followed, a swirling kaleidoscope of silk and power. Marco, puffed up with his new promotion, grabbed the arm of a stunning redhead. As he passed the alcove, he shot a look at his cousin. It was a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. He leaned in and said something. Serafina was too far to hear the words, but the tone was sharp, jabbing, and cruel. Matteo flinched. It was a tiny, sharp movement, as if he'd been pricked with a needle. His hands clamped down on the puzzle box. The music swelled, a wave of violins and cellos, and with the swell, Matteo's body began to rock. It was a small, tight motion, a physical manifestation of his distress. The music, the lights, Marco's words. It was all too much. He was being overwhelmed, drowning in a sea of sensory input. His bodyguard, a block of granite named Arturo, stood a few feet away. He stepped forward and placed a heavy, rough hand on Matteo's shoulder. "Boss's kid, stand still," he muttered, giving him a small, impatient shake. "You're making a scene." Matteo's breathing hitched. He pressed himself further into the wall, his knuckles turning white on the silver box. Serafina saw it all, the casual cruelty of Marco, the impatient roughness of the guard, the public, painful isolation of Matteo. And something inside her snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an impulse, a raw, primal need to do something. It was the same impulse that made her study architecture, to build something safe, something logical and beautiful, in a world that was chaotic and ugly. She looked at her tray of empty glasses. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who was glaring at her from across the room. She looked at Don Valerio, spinning his partner on the dance floor, the undisputed king of his domain. This is madness, she thought. This is how you get fired. This is how you get hurt. But her feet were already moving. She placed her tray on a nearby marble credenza. She smoothed her apron, a useless, nervous gesture. She walked the 10 steps into the alcove, past the towering white orchids. Arturo, the bodyguard, saw her coming and tensed, his hand moving to the bulge under his jacket. "Server. Get lost." Serafina ignored him. She stopped directly in front of the crouched young man. Matteo was vibrating now, his eyes squeezed shut behind the headphones, his head turned away. He was deep in his own world of pain. She didn't speak. What could she say? Instead, she remembered the waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A pattern, a structure. Slowly, so as not to startle him, she bent her knees slightly, bringing herself to his eye level, and she held out her hand. Just that. Her small, work-roughened hand, palm up. An invitation. He didn't respond. He was locked inside himself. She waited. A full 10 seconds. The music swirled around them. She could feel the heat of Arturo's glare. She was about to give up, to retreat in humiliation, when she tried one last thing. She tapped her foot. Softly. 1, 2, 3. She tapped it again. 1, 2, 3. His head tilted a fraction of an inch. His eyes opened. They were a disorienting, intense blue. He wasn't looking at her, but past her, at her foot. He watched the simple, rhythmic tap. 1, 2, 3. His fingers on the puzzle box relaxed. He was processing. He saw the pattern. He lifted his head. His gaze moved from her foot to her hand. He stared at it for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out. He placed his silver puzzle box on the small table beside him, and he put his hand in hers. His skin was cool. His grip was light, hesitant. Serafina smiled, a small, trembling smile. She stood up slowly, pulling him gently with her. He rose to his full height, unfolding from his crouch. He was taller than she'd thought, dwarfing her. She kept hold of his hand. With her other, she gestured to the dance floor. And then she did the unthinkable. She stepped into the frame of the alcove, pulling him with her, onto the edge of the glittering dance floor. The world didn't just stop. It froze. The whispers died. The laughter evaporated. The clinking of glasses ceased. The only sound was the orchestra, which, for a bar or two, seemed to waver, as if the musicians themselves were in shock. Don Valerio stopped mid-spin. His partner stumbled. His grey eyes, a moment ago jovial, turned to chips of ice. Marco Rinaldi, across the floor, literally stopped, his mouth open. Every eye in the room, every capo, every soldier, every politician, every wife was on them. The invisible waitress and the broken air. Matteo was rigid. He was staring at the floor, his breathing shallow. He was a target, exposed, the headphones his only shield. "It's okay," Serafina whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Just follow me. It's just a pattern." She placed his left hand on her waist, the fabric of her cheap uniform a stark contrast to his bespoke jacket. She took his other hand. 1, 2, 3, she murmured, moving her own feet. 1, 2, 3. He watched her feet. 1, 2, 3. He took a step. It was stiff, awkward. He took another. 1, 2, 3. He was a natural mimic. He saw the pattern and he replicated it. His feet found the rhythm. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. They weren't swirling like the dawn. They were barely moving, just a small, shuffling box step at the edge of the massive floor. But they were dancing. A bubble formed around them. Serafina stopped seeing the staring, horrified faces. She stopped seeing the Don's incandescent rage. She focused only on Matteo. His shoulders, which had been up by his ears, began to drop. The tension in his hand eased. He was still staring over her head, not making eye contact, but he was with her. He was processing the rhythm. And then, a small miracle. He lifted his head. He looked past her, at the swirling couples, at the lights. And for the first time that night, his body wasn't a knot of tension. He was just standing, dancing. The waltz swelled to its climax. Serafina, in her cheap black shoes, moved with him, a small, quiet anchor in his storm. The final chord hung in the air, echoing in the terrible, vast silence of the ballroom. The song was over. Serafina's hands dropped. The bubble burst. The weight of 100 stares pressed down on her. She was terrified, her blood running cold. Matteo stood there. The absence of music seemed to disorient him more than the sound had. He blinked, and then he did something no one expected. He reached up, and with one fluid motion, he pulled his large headphones from his head, letting them rest around his neck. The sudden influx of the room's ambient sound made him wince, but he held his ground. He looked down at her, not at her shoulder, not past her ear, but at her. His blue eyes, clear and sharp as a winter sky, met hers. He leaned in, and his voice, when it came, was not the grunt or yell she might have expected. It was a low, resonant baritone, quiet and unused, with a precise, almost academic articulation. "Stay," he said. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact. And then the room exploded. "Arturo!" Don Valerio's voice was a whip crack. "Get him! Get her!" 2 bodyguards, Arturo and another, were on them in an instant. Arturo grabbed Matteo's arm, not gently. "Come on, Matteo." Matteo flinched, pulling back, his hard-won calm shattering. The other guard, a brute Serafina hadn't seen before, grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her bicep like a steel trap. "You're done, little girl." He started to drag her toward the kitchens, toward the exit, toward she didn't know what. She was going to be fired. She was going to be worse. "No," a voice said. It was Matteo. He had ripped his arm from Arturo's grasp and had taken a step toward her. His face was pale, his hands clenched. "No," he said again, louder, addressing the guard who held her. "Let her go." The guard just laughed, a short, ugly sound. "And who are you to—" "He is my son." Don Valerio's voice cut through the air. He had crossed the room, his face a thundercloud. The guard holding Serafina instantly released her, his hand jumping back as if he'd touched fire. He stepped back, head bowed. "Don Bianchi, apologies." Serafina rubbed her arm, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Valerio Bianchi ignored the guard. He ignored his son. His Arctic grey eyes drilled into Serafina. He looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, he saw her cheap clothes, her frightened eyes, and the defiant tilt of her chin. "You," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Who are you?" "Serafina de Rosa, sir, from the catering company." "Not anymore," Valerio said. He jerked his head toward the guard. "Take her to my office, now." He turned to Arturo. "Take Matteo to his rooms and find out what she did." The walk to the office was the longest of Serafina's life. The guard's hand was a heavy, proprietary weight on her back, steering her through a private door, away from the ballroom's stunned silence, and into the heart of the fortress. They walked down a corridor of dark, polished wood, lined with portraits of grim-faced ancestors who looked as unforgiving as their descendant. She was shoved, not gently, into a room that was less an office and more a baronial hall. A massive, carved mahogany desk dominated the space, backed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the dark, churning Atlantic. The air smelled of old leather, expensive scotch, and cigar smoke. The guard, whose name she learned was Silvio, grunted. "Wait here. Don't touch anything." He closed the heavy door, and the sound of a key turning in the lock was a definitive, terrifying click. She was locked in. She stood in the center of the vast, antique rug, too terrified to sit, too panicked to think. What had she done? She'd humiliated the Don. She'd made a spectacle of his son. In this world, people disappeared for less. They disappeared for spilling a drink. She'd just danced with the family's secret shame. Her mind raced, calculating. She had $74 in her checking account. Her rent was due. Her scholarship covered tuition, but not the crushing cost of New York living. If she was just fired, she'd be destitute. If she was worse, the door opened so silently she didn't hear it until Valerio Bianchi spoke. "Sit." She jumped, spinning around. He was standing by the door, his face unreadable. He walked past her, not to his desk, but to a dark wood bar in the corner. He poured 2 glasses of Macallan 25, the amber liquid catching the low light. "I said, sit," he repeated, gesturing with the bottle to one of the plush leather chairs facing the desk. Serafina sat. Her knees felt weak, and she perched on the very edge of the cushion, her hands clenched in her lap. He walked over and placed one of the heavy crystal tumblers on the small table beside her. He took the other and sat not behind his desk, the seat of power, but in the chair opposite her. It was a disarming move, and it terrified her more than his anger. He took a slow, appreciative sip of his scotch, his grey eyes never leaving her face. He was assessing her, the way he might assess a new racehorse or a new weapon. "Serafina de Rosa," he said, rolling the name on his tongue. "You are a student. NYU, architectural history. Your father, Giuseppe de Rosa, owed my father a favor, a debt that was never fully repaid. Your mother works as a seamstress in Queens. You are very smart and very poor." Serafina's blood turned to ice. He hadn't just found out who she was. He had, in the 10 minutes it took to walk here, accessed her entire life. The casual, absolute power of it choked her. "Sir," she began, her voice a reedy whisper. "I don't know what you did," he interrupted, leaning forward, the affable mask gone, "was walk across my ballroom, in front of 200 of the most powerful people on the East Coast, and touch my son. I didn't mean any disrespect." "Disrespect?" He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Child, you bypassed disrespect 10 miles back. You committed an act of, I don't even know what to call it." He took another drink. "He looked distressed," Serafina said, finding a small, trembling shard of courage. "The music, the man who spoke to him, your nephew, he was overwhelmed. The guard, he was hurting him." Valerio's eyes narrowed. "You saw all that?" I see things. People don't look at the staff. It's like being invisible. You notice patterns?" "Patterns." He tasted the word. "And what pattern did you see in my son?" "He was trapped," she said, the words tumbling out now. "Everyone was looking at him. But no one was seeing him. They were all so loud, the noise. He was just trying to find a pattern, the puzzle box, the rhythm. Valerio stared into his glass. He has specialists, the best in the world. Doctors from Zurich, therapists from Boston. They cost me a fortune. They give him pills. They teach him coping mechanisms. They do nothing. He looked up, and for a fleeting second, Serafina didn't see a mafia don. She saw a father, bewildered and exhausted. "And you," he continued, his voice low, "a 22-year-old waitress, you walk up to him and he dances. It was just a waltz. It's a simple box step. It's a pattern. 1, 2, 3. And then he spoke," Valerio said, his voice hard again. "He told you to stay. He told Arturo, no. He hasn't spoken a coherent, unprompted sentence to anyone but his therapists in 5 years." The Don stood up, restless, and walked to the window. He stared out at the black, angry ocean. "He's my blood, my firstborn. But this world, our world, it has no place for what he is." He spat the word. "Marco, my nephew, he is strong. He is what this family needs. But Matteo, he is the heir." "He's not what you think," Serafina whispered. Valerio spun around. "What? He's not simple. He's not broken. I've spent millions trying to fix him." "He's not broken," Serafina said, standing up, her fear suddenly eclipsed by a wave of indignation. "He's just different. His mind is different. He's not broken. He's precise. He was overwhelmed. He needed a different kind of structure, not a louder voice." Valerio stared at her. The silence in the room was absolute. He was calculating, his mind working behind those cold, grey eyes. "What you did tonight," he said slowly, "was a problem. You embarrassed me. You showed a weakness in my house. I'm sorry, sir. I'll get my things. I'll go." She turned toward the door. "You're not going anywhere." She froze. "You have 2 options, Miss DeRosa." He walked to his desk, finally sitting behind it. He was the Don again. "Option 1. You leave this room. I make a call. Your scholarship to NYU is revoked. The catering company you work for loses all its contracts. Your mother's landlord finds a reason to evict her. Your father's old debt, it's repaid. By you, in ways you don't want to imagine. You will be erased." Serafina's stomach bottomed out. She gripped the back of the chair to stay upright. "Option 2, he said, steepling his fingers. "You walked into that ballroom as a waitress. You will leave it as an employee of the Bianchi family. A different kind of employee." "What kind of employee?" "You're not a doctor. You're not a therapist. But you're a pattern seeker. He listened to you, or whatever it is he does." "He responded to me," she corrected. A faint smile touched Valerio's lips. "Yes, he did. I want you to be his companion, his tutor, his keeper. I don't care what you call it. You will live here at the Falcon's Crest. You will be on call 24 hours a day. Your job is Matteo. You want me to be his babysitter? I want you to keep him calm," Valerio snapped. "I want you to be his buffer. I want him functional. The world saw what happened tonight. I need to control the narrative. My son is not broken. He is eccentric, and he is being cared for by a private specialist." He was offering her a prison, a gilded cage, just like Matteo's. "You'll have a suite of rooms. You'll be paid a salary that will make your head spin. Your family will be safe. The debt is forgotten. Your mother will never work another day unless she wants to. Your education will be paid for." It was a trap, and they both knew it. An unbreakable contract, signed in fear. "And what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Everything. You will report to me. What he says, what he does, his moods, his patterns. You will be my window into his mind. You will find what connects with him, and you will use it. Use it for what? To make him presentable, to make him viable. He is a Bianchi. It's time he started acting like one. You are the key, Miss De Rosa. You just proved it. Serafina looked at the untouched glass of scotch. She thought of her mother's hands, cracked and bleeding from the pins and needles. She thought of her father's shame. She thought of Matteo, his blue eyes, his quiet, precise voice. Stay. She was trapped, but maybe so was he. And if I refuse? Valerio's smile was chilling. You already know the answer to that. I don't make offers, Miss De Rosa. I present the new reality. He pulled a single sheet of paper from a drawer, a non-disclosure agreement, so thick and terrifying it barely seemed like paper. You will sign this. You will see nothing. You will hear nothing. You will speak of nothing that happens in this house. Your life as you knew it is over. Serafina looked at the paper. She looked at the Don. Where do I sign? The next 24 hours were a blur. Serafina did not return to the ballroom. She was escorted by Silvio, who now looked at her with a strange, unnerving mix of deference and suspicion, not to the staff quarters, but to the family wing of the estate. Her suite was larger than her entire queen's apartment. It consisted of a sitting room, a bedroom, and a massive marble bathroom, all decorated in a heavy, opulent style of gold leaf and dark brocades. It was beautiful, suffocating, and cold. A prison cell furnished by royalty. Her cheap canvas bag, containing her textbook and a change of clothes, looked pathetic on the silk-covered king-sized bed. She was given rules. She was to dine in her room or with Matteo. She was not to wander the grounds without an escort, Arturo, the bodyguard. She was not to speak to any staff outside of her duties. And, as Don Valerio had made clear, she was to report to him, in his office, every evening at 9 p.m. Her first morning, she was woken by a polite knock. A maid she hadn't seen before, a nervous young woman named Lucia, brought her a breakfast tray and a stack of new clothes. Cashmere sweaters, dark wool trousers, sensible but expensive leather boots, a new uniform, the uniform of the private specialist. Her waitress blacks were gone. Don Bianchi said these would be more appropriate, miss, Lucia whispered, her eyes on the floor. Thank you, Lucia. Please call me Serafina. Lucia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. Oh no, Miss De Rosa. I couldn't. She curtsied and practically ran from the room. Serafina sighed. She was no longer staff. She was something else. Something other. She was just as isolated as Matteo. After a breakfast she barely touched, she was met by Arturo. The Don's son is in his wing. This way. Matteo's wing was in the oldest part of the mansion. It was, she quickly realized, less of a wing and more of a self-contained apartment, a fortress within a fortress. Arturo keyed in a code, and a heavy oak door buzzed open. He doesn't like visitors, Arturo grunted. The Don is the only one who comes in here. And now you. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Don't startle him. I won't, Serafina said, stepping past him. The door clicked shut behind her, and this time she was the one locked in. The main room was not what she expected. The rest of the house was dark, heavy, and antique. This room was a shock of modern, minimalist design. It was all pale woods, white walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows. But it was the contents that made her stop. One wall was a massive, two-story library, filled not just with books, but with thousands of vinyl records. A concert-grade turntable and sound system sat in the corner. Another wall was covered in blueprints, detailed, complex, professional-grade architectural drawings of skyscrapers, bridges, and fantastical, impossible structures. And the entire floor was a city, a sprawling, incredibly detailed model of Manhattan built entirely from white Lego bricks. It was perfect. The scale, the proportions. She recognized her own university library, the Chrysler Building, the new, towering monoliths of Hudson Yards. And in the center of it, kneeling, was Matteo. He was back in his own clothes, a simple grey knit sweater and dark trousers. His headphones were on. He was meticulously placing a tiny, one-stud brick onto the roof of a half-finished skyscraper. He didn't look up. He didn't acknowledge her. Serafina stood there for a full minute, her heart pounding. This was his world. This was his language. The blueprints, the music, the city. He wasn't just simple. He was a goddamned architect. "You're building the new KPF tower," she said, her voice soft. He didn't move. "The one on 57th Street, she continued, walking slowly toward the model, being careful not to cast a shadow on his work. "I saw the proposals. I thought their cantilever design was too aggressive, but you've solved the load-bearing issue, haven't you?" She pointed to the complex, intricate cross-bracing he'd built into the model's core. "You're using a tuned mass damper system, but you've modified it. That's brilliant. It would actually work." Matteo's hand stilled. He sat back on his heels. He did not turn. He did not look at her. He simply picked up a different brick and placed it on another part of the model. Serafina smiled. This was the game. This was the invitation. She walked not to him, but to the massive vinyl collection. It was organized not by artist or genre, but by composer and then by key. She ran her fingers over the spines. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Satie. "What are we building to today?" she asked, pulling out a record. Chopin's nocturnes seem too quiet for this kind of work. "Maybe Bach? Cello Suite No. 1? She slid the heavy vinyl from its sleeve, placed it on the turntable, and gently lowered the needle. The rich, complex, mathematical notes of the cello filled the room. The music was a structure. It was a building in itself. Matteo stopped building. He tilted his head, listening. Serafina walked back to the Lego city. She didn't kneel. She simply sat, cross-legged, a few feet away, respecting his space. She didn't look at him. She looked at his city. "My name is Serafina," she said to the city. "I study buildings." They sat in silence for 10 minutes. The only sounds were Bach's cello and the soft click, click of Lego bricks as Matteo resumed his work. Finally, just as the first side of the record ended, he spoke, his voice the same quiet, precise baritone she remembered. He was addressing the building he was working on. "It's not a KPF design, it's mine." Serafina's heart leapt. "It's better," she said, just as quietly. "The way you've distributed the wind load, it's beautiful." He paused. He reached for a new piece. "They never get the foundations right." "No," Serafina agreed. "They're always in a hurry to reach the sky. They forget that nothing stands without a strong foundation." Matteo turned his head. He looked at her. His blue eyes were not cold, she realized. They were just intense. He was processing her, analyzing her, like one of his blueprints. "Why aren't you bored?" he asked. It was a genuine question. Serafina thought for a moment. "Are you?" A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "I'm busy." "So am I," she said. "I'm learning." He turned back to his model. He picked up a small, clear brick and held it out to her. A window. Serafina took it. She crawled forward and, following his pattern, placed it precisely where it belonged in the structure. She had passed a test. She spent the rest of the day in that room. They didn't talk much, but they communicated. When he became agitated, when Arturo brought him lunch, a disruption of his space, His hands started to flap. Serafina, remembering his reaction to the waltz, didn't try to stop him. She simply went to the piano in the corner and began to play. A simple, repetitive scale. C, D, E, F, G, G, F, E, D, C, a pattern. Matteo's movements slowed. He closed his eyes, his hands coming to rest on his puzzle box. He was anchoring himself to her pattern. When she reported to Valerio at 9 p.m., the Don was impatient. "Well?" he demanded, forgoing the scotch. "What did he do? What did he say?" "We talked," Serafina said, choosing her words. "About architecture." "Architecture?" Valerio looked disgusted. "Useless. Did you calm him?" He wasn't agitated, not until his routine was broken. "So what? You just sat there?" "We built a skyscraper," Serafina said, "and we listened to Bach." Valerio stared at her. "A skyscraper, and Bach. This is your method?" "He's brilliant, Don Bianchi," she said, her voice firm. "He's not just simple. He's a structural genius. His mind, it's like a computer. He just processes things differently. You don't need to calm him. You just need to speak his language." "His language is silence and Legos." "No," Serafina said, surprising herself with her own boldness. "His language is structure, music, mathematics, patterns. You're trying to force him to speak yours. It won't work." Valerio's fist hit the desk. "I don't pay you for psychoanalysis, Ms. De Rosa. I pay you to make him normal." "You can't," Serafina said, her voice dropping. "But you can make him safe. And if he's safe, he might be able to function in your world." Valerio's anger deflated, leaving only the cold calculation. "Fine. His language. Your language. I don't care, just fix it. My associates, my rivals, they're asking questions. What was that at the gala? Is the Don's heir a fool? Marco is positioning. I need to show strength. I need to show my son." "Show him where?" Serafina asked, a cold dread filling her. "The Karas family. The Greeks. They're hosting a reception at the Vanderbilt Gallery in 3 days, a neutral ground. They want to see him. They want to see the weakness in my line." "A gallery?" Serafina said, her mind racing. "A public place, with crowds? That's a terrible idea. He'll be overwhelmed." "That," Valerio said, a cruel smile touching his lips, "is your problem to solve, Ms. De Rosa. You have 3 days to make him functional. Take him out, get him used to people, or that contract we signed becomes void, and we revert to option 1. 3 days. Serafina felt the panic rise in her throat. 3 days to take a man who lived in a self-contained, soundproofed world and prepare him for a shark tank. She spent every waking moment with Matteo. She learned his routines, his language, his triggers. His language was not words, it was music. Chopin's nocturnes meant he was calm, reflective. The frantic, complex etudes meant his mind was racing, agitated. Beethoven's late string quartets were for when the world was too much, when he was in pain. His language was his blueprints. He wasn't just drawing buildings, he was drawing his state of mind. Symmetrical, balanced structures meant he was stable. Jagged, impossible cantilevers meant he was anxious. After his father's visits, he always drew bridges. Collapsing bridges. His language was sensation. He hated the texture of most foods, preferring simple, plain items, dry toast, apple slices, plain pasta. He hated the feeling of wool. He loved the smooth, cold surface of marble and the precise, heavy weight of his silver puzzle box. And he, in his own way, was learning her. He began to associate her with the Bach cello suites. When she entered his room, he would go to the turntable and put the record on. A welcome. He noticed her patterns. He noticed she sketched her architectural homework. One afternoon, As she was struggling with a complex drawing of a flying buttress, he wordlessly took her pencil. He didn't fix her drawing. He simply took a fresh sheet of paper and, in 3 perfect lines, illustrated the correct distribution of force. He wasn't teaching her. He was just clarifying the pattern. "Oh," she said, stunned. "Of course. The lateral thrust." "Of course," he murmured, handing the pencil back. The romance, if it could be called that, was not built on flirtation or passion. It was built on the shared, silent understanding of 2 people who saw the world in structure. It was built in the space between the notes of a cello suite, in the shared appreciation of a perfect architectural line. He began to trust her. He would let her sit closer to him while he built. He would, occasionally, offer her a piece, letting her participate in his world. He also started, slowly, to talk. Not small talk. Never small talk. He only spoke when he had a fact to convey. "That's a Doric column," he said one day, pointing to a picture in her textbook. "The Parthenon. But they built it with an optical illusion. Entasis. The columns bulge in the middle so they appear straight to the human eye. It's a lie. But it's a beautiful lie." "You've been there?" Serafina asked. "No," he said, turning back to his Legos. "I don't go out." The words hung in the air. "I don't go out." "The Vanderbilt Gallery, it's not a lie," Serafina said softly, trying to bridge the gap. "It's a collection. It's housed in an old mansion, a Beaux-Arts design." Matteo's hands stilled. "Beaux-Arts," he repeated. "Symmetrical, grand, highly decorative, based on Roman and Greek principles." "Yes," Serafina said, her heart picking up. "I have to go. In 2 days. My employer wants me to see it." She couldn't bring herself to say his employer. His father. Matteo was silent for a long time. "I have pictures," he said finally. "In a book." "It's better in person," she said. "You can see the way the light hits the marble. You can feel the foundation." He looked at her, his blue eyes wide, a flicker of something wanting in them, but it was quickly replaced by a shadow of fear. "Too many people," he whispered. "The sound. It's sharp." "What if it wasn't?" she said, kneeling beside him. "What if you had a shield?" He looked at his headphones. "And me," she said, her voice barely a breath. "I'll be your buffer, your entasis. I'll make the world appear straight, even when it's not." He considered this. He looked at her. Then at his city. He picked up a single, transparent, blue Lego brick and placed it in her palm. A drop of water. Or a piece of the sky. "Tomorrow," she said. "We'll try. Just a drive. A small step." The next day, she fought with Valerio. He wanted her to take him to a cafe, get him a coffee, make him act normal. "No," Serafina insisted, standing in the lion's den of his office. "That's a sensory nightmare. Fluorescent lights, espresso machines, screaming, people talking. You're setting him up to fail." "Then what, Ms. De Rosa? Your method?" "A park," she said. "An empty one, early, and not in his father's conspicuous Maserati. A simple car, a boring car." She won. She got a black Lexus sedan, and Arturo, who was furious at the demotion. The drive was tense. Matteo sat in the back, headphones on, puzzle box in his hands, staring out the window, his entire body a rigid line of tension. They drove to a small, wind-swept park overlooking the Long Island Sound. It was 7 a.m. It was empty. "We wait," Arturo grunted from the driver's seat. "No," Serafina said. She got out and opened Matteo's door. "We walk, just for 5 minutes, to the water and back." "The Don said," Arturo began. "The Don said to make him functional," Serafina snapped, surprising them both. "This is how we do it." Matteo got out of the car. He looked pale, his head swiveling, taking in the open sky, the sound of the wind, the distant cry of a gull. It was all too much. He started to rock. "It's okay," Serafina said, standing beside him. "It's just us. Look." She pointed not at the overwhelming ocean, but at the ground. A pattern. "Look at the bricks. They're laid in a herringbone pattern." Matteo's gaze dropped. He focused on the bricks. V-shape, V-shape, V-shape. "Just follow the pattern," she said, "to the bench and back." She started walking, stepping on the point of each V. He watched her. Then he followed. He matched her stride, his long legs easily finding the pattern. V-shape, V-shape. They walked to the bench. They stood there for a minute, the wind whipping her hair. He just stared at the intricate brickwork. "Good," she said. "Let's go back." They walked the pattern back to the car. He got in. He didn't speak, but his hands, when he picked up his puzzle box, were steadier. It was a victory. Small, but it was a start. The night of the Vanderbilt Gallery reception, the tension in the estate was thick enough to cut. Serafina, dressed in a simple, dark blue dress, provided by Valerio, of course, stood by the grand entrance, her stomach in knots. Matteo appeared at the top of the stairs, and her breath caught. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark grey suit. His hair was combed. He wasn't wearing his headphones. He was holding them. But he looked magnificent. He looked like the heir to a kingdom. Beside him, smirking, was Marco Rinaldi. "He cleans up nice, doesn't he?" Marco said to Serafina, his eyes roaming over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "My uncle's little project, the tame specialist and the broken toy." "He's not a toy, Marco," Serafina said, her voice cold. "Oh, he's whatever my uncle says he is," Marco sneered. He clapped Matteo on the back, a heavy, rough gesture that made Matteo flinch visibly. "Ready for the big show, cousin? Don't drool on the Greeks." Matteo said nothing. He just stared at Marco's hand on his shoulder, until Marco, uncomfortable under the blank, intense stare, removed it. "Don Bianchi is waiting in the car," Serafina said, stepping between them. She looked at Matteo. "It's just a building, Matteo, full of patterns. We'll find them." He looked at her, and for a second she saw a terrifying, profound vulnerability. He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin. He put his silver puzzle box in his pocket. He was going into battle without his armor. "Arturo will be with you, of course," Marco said, his smile all teeth. "And I'll be handling oversight. We can't have any accidents." The way he said it, accidents, sent a shiver of pure dread down Serafina's spine. This wasn't just a reception. It was a test. And it was a test that Marco Rinaldi intended for his cousin to fail. The Vanderbilt Gallery was a sensory explosion. As Matteo froze in the entryway, overwhelmed by the noise and lights, Serafina gave him a lifeline. "Find the pattern," she murmured, directing his gaze to the floor. "Just stay on the white squares." Using the checkerboard marble as a grid, he navigated the staring crowd, a pale, focused ghost. They were met by Don Valerio and the rival Don, Stavros Karas, who immediately tested Matteo. Pointing to a chaotic, abstract painting, Karas asked for his opinion. Matteo stared, then spoke, his voice clear. "It's not a Pollock. The drip pattern is fraudulent. The gravity is inconsistent, faked by a left-hander." Karas roared with laughter. "By God, he's right. I bought it as a test, and your boy spots it in 30 seconds. Valerio looked stunned, then proud. Across the room, Marco Rinaldi's face was a mask of cold fury. His cousin was supposed to fail. As they prepared to leave, Marco intercepted them. "I'll handle your exit," he sneered, directing them to a dark service alley. "It's a shortcut, less fanfare." He sent Arturo to the front, blocking their escape. The alley was dark. As a car blocked the far end, two large men emerged. Marco stood by the door, his voice dripping with false pity. A shame, a tragic accident. The disabled heir, overwhelmed, just wanders off. The men advanced. Serafina realized the truth. This wasn't a shortcut. It was a trap. Marco intended to kill them. The air in the alley was thick with brick dust. As Valerio Bianchi demanded answers, Matteo calmly exposed his cousin's plot. He identified the fleeing driver and linked him to Marco, stating, "His pattern was obvious. Too loud." Marco, panicked, tried to discredit him. "He's simple, uncle. He's confused." "He's not confused," Serafina countered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "He calculated the danger. He saw the flaw in your plan, and he saved my life." Valerio's face was a mask of cold fury. He saw the truth. "Arturo," he commanded, his voice dead. "Take my nephew to the Red Room. We will talk." As Marco was dragged away, Stavros Karas noted, "You don't have a weak heir, Valerio. You have a precise one. That is far more dangerous." Valerio was left staring at his son, baffled. "He was never broken," Serafina whispered. "He was just speaking a language you couldn't understand." On the silent drive home, Valerio was lost in thought. In the back, Matteo took Serafina's hand, his grip warm and steady. The mansion was still a cage, she realized, but she was locked inside with the one man who understood its architecture. That's a wrap on tonight's Midnight Story. What a journey. It just goes to show that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. They're not ignoring the world, they're just processing it on a different level. Serafina and Matteo, their story is just beginning, and that world of violence and power has no idea what's coming. They were the two most invisible people in the room, and together they're about to become the only two that matter.